let's start with what's happening in the Gabby Petito case, where she was this young woman who was, we believe, strangled to death by her boyfriend, Brian Laundrie. They were from Florida, but they had traveled to various national parks in their van, promoted this all over social media as van life. She was absolutely beautiful in every sense of the word. And notwithstanding the fact that they'd been stopped for a domestic violence incident in which a witness saw him hitting her, the cops let them go, separated them briefly, but not much was done. Not blaming the cops, I'm just giving the frame of reference. And ultimately, he killed her. He killed her in Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. Then he went home to Florida in the van where his parents lived. And there was a period of time, I can't remember, it was a week or so, where we didn't know where Gabby was, what had happened to her. Her parents were saying, we can't reach her. We're very worried about her. And it is that period of time that has led to this lawsuit, because it turns out Brian had spoken to his parents, had called them on the phone even prior to arriving back home, is my understanding, and had clearly made some admissions to them. And now Gabby Petito's parents, the parents of the victim, are blaming Brian Laundrie's parents for not coming right out with it, saying, your son had told you what he'd done to Gabby. You knew, or had reason to know, she was dead at that point. You didn't come tell us. In fact, you made public statements that seemed to suggest the opposite. And Marcia, it's an emotional distress case, right? Intentional infliction of emotional distress, where the one set of parents is going after the other set. By the way, I forgot to mention Brian Laundrie wound up dying by suicide. He took his own life with a gun in an alligator preserve or swamp down in Florida. So what do you make of this case?
The tough one. I think that it's possible that the victims will prevail, the plaintiffs will prevail here on an emotional level. How much the jury votes in terms of damages is going probably to be the way they balance ultimately the equities in this case. Because bear in mind that Brian Laundrie's parents are saying, I didn't know he meant that he'd killed her. They say that he never came out and said such a thing at all, that at most he said she's gone. And then the mother comes the closest to saying, well, I thought because he asked for a lawyer also in the context of those conversations, she thought, well, maybe he hit her. Maybe there was a domestic violence situation and she took off and he's afraid he's going to get sued, which is not unreasonable. I can imagine a parent saying, I can't believe my kid would do this. He's not like this guy was homicidal, was in and out of prison, has any kind of history. So it's not unreasonable that they would resist the conclusion that he killed her. Pretty extreme. So, I think it does kind of hinge on whether you believe them when they say, we didn't know what he had done. We didn't know she was dead. And I think they're going to get some degree of compassion from the jury on that regard. But so is the plaintiff, saying, you should have told us what you knew. You should have been more forthcoming. But I think that probably they win on, the emotional appeal in terms of a verdict, in terms of yes, you caused emotional distress, and maybe you should have known. Remember, it's a preponderance standard, not beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's pretty low. And then I think they balance it out in terms of the monetary award.
Among other things, Mark, their lawyer, the parents of Brian Laundrie, their lawyer came out and said on September 14th, 2021, on behalf of the family, it is our hope that the search for Miss Petito is successful and that Miss Petito is reunited with her family. And now what we're learning in these depositions, the trial set for May, is that the parents, prior to having their lawyer issue that statement, had spoken to Brian, that Brian had made repeated calls, including one that lasted an hour, one that lasted 22 minutes, saying, she's gone. As Marcia points out, she's gone. I need a lawyer. I might need a lawyer. And the dad is trying to say, and just help me, just help me. And the dad is trying to say that he was very panicked. Brian was saying he didn't know what to do. And I didn't know what he meant by Gabby's gone and I need a lawyer. Okay. So I don't know if we believe that, Mark, but I will say this. Does a parent have the obligation? Let's say he didn't believe. Let's say he believed he was saying she's dead and I did something and I need a lawyer. Does a parent have an obligation to come out with that? to the victim's family?
I know it's interesting because if you were saying this to a spouse, you would have a privilege. If you were saying this normally to a lawyer, you would have privilege. Here you have kind of these statements that can be taken two ways. Normally, a judge, I will tell you, in California, most judges would not let this get to past a summary judgment or what's called a demur. Normally, this would be thrown out. Here you've got a very emotional, as Marcia was kind of detailing, you've got an emotional draw to this. But in most jurisdictions and with most judges, they would say this is way too amorphous to attach liability to, and it can be interpreted in a number of ways. And you don't have necessarily a duty, if you will, to tell them one way or another. When you say, we hope she's reunited with the parents, does that mean her remains or not her remains? Those kinds of factual issues. It's a very tough situation. I think legally, it's not a tough situation emotionally. I think if you get in front of a jury with a case like this, you could probably prevail and get a jury to really hang their hat on this and come back with some incredible damages just because of the emotion here and wanting, jurors do have a tendency, like most people, to want to hold somebody accountable. You don't have him anymore because he committed suicide. You've got the parents there. You want to hold somebody accountable. And I suppose it comes down to whether or not they are believed as to what they knew and when they knew it.
I don't know, Marcia. I have to say, so they already sued the estate of Brian Laundrie, the killer, and they got what's described as a symbolic $3 million judgment, meaning he wasn't worth any money. So they got this money, but they're never going to collect. So now they go to his parents to sue for emotional distress. And while I have nothing but empathy for the Petitos, I can't help but feel like, God forbid, your own child called you and said, I'm in trouble. I'm panicked. I need a lawyer. She's gone. I think I'd want to help my child. I think I'd be scared. I hate to say this, and God forbid, but are we really going to make parents financially responsible for not turning in their kids or going to the cops with it or going to the victim's parents who they did know? I get all that. That's a slippery slope.
I agree. And the problem is, for example, let me just give you another example of how the parents could be held liable is if they knew their son was violent towards this woman, they provide him with a gun. And then you say, okay, wait a minute, what do you think happens next? 1 + 1 = 2. But that's not the situation here. This is a situation where, as I said before, this kid has the deceased had no prior record that we know of violence. Yes, there was a recent report of domestic violence between them. That doesn't necessarily mean that he, when he calls to say she's gone and we had a fight or whatever, that he killed her. And if you're a parent, you're certainly going to resist that conclusion on a very basic emotional level, having had nothing else to hang on to in terms of, well, he did it before, so I can see where he'd do it again. Not so in this case. So, yeah, I can see the parents not wanting to, and I don't really know, legally speaking, and I think Mark is right about this, they probably would not have gotten past a demur or a summary judgment motion in most courts with this claim, because you can't prove what the Laundries knew, what they understood from the cryptic remarks that he did make, and you have the other side of it, which is what I was saying, the emotional appeal goes both ways. And a parent is going to say, I don't want to turn in my kid when I don't really know what happened. I'm going to go say arrest him for murder when I don't really have a confession per se. I think a natural reaction of a parent is to say, I'll help you. Tell me what you need. And that's what they did do. He said he needed a lawyer. They got one. And they didn't seem to be deliberately hiding anything so much as unclear on exactly what was going on. So I think it's a very tough case for a jury to sort through because of the dueling emotional appeals on both sides.
I know, because these parents, of course, I realize their son was a murderer, but they loved him. They lost him too. They have suffered. It wasn't their fault that Brian committed this murder any more than it's the fault of any parent when their child does something terrible. I don't know. The whole case makes me uncomfortable. I don't see it. I have to be honest. I don't see a liability for the Laundrie parents in this case. Discover a holistic wellness solution with Bond Charge, a brand dedicated to optimizing every aspect of your life. Grounded in science and inspired by nature, their evidence-based products cover a broad spectrum of premium wellness items, from enhancing sleep and performance to boosting energy, accelerating recovery, and balancing hormones. Bond Charge offers a diverse range of benefits. Consider the infrared sauna blanket from Bond Charge that they say can burn extra calories and detoxify. This innovative blanket elevates your heart rate, simulating the effects of physical exercise. Bond Charge says sweating during the process helps eliminate heavy metals and toxins from your body. Setting it up takes less than a minute, and it rapidly heats up for a quick and convenient experience. For a limited time, save 15% by visiting bondcharge.com/MK and use the coupon code MK. That's BONCHARGE.com/MK and use that coupon code MK to save yourself 15% off your order. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.